One of the very first things that you need to learn in chemistry, of course, are the element names and symbols. But we've carefully selected a few of them that you need to know. You do not need to know the whole periodic table. So let's go through these. Before we start, you'll want to print out a page that looks like this. This is not part of your lecture notes, but it is the selection that we're going to be using, and you need to be able to find this in your lecture notes. In this list, we have 30 elements and their names and symbols, and those are the ones that you will be using throughout the rest of the semester. You will not need to know the rest of them, although you may encounter them. You won't need to know them in order to answer the questions that are related to them. Notice a few things. We have two important parts. Number 1, spelling counts, and number 2, capitalization matters. So whenever you have a two-lettered symbol, so a symbol with two letters, the first letter is uppercase and the second letter will be in a lowercase letter. Therefore, the symbol for magnesium is uppercase M, lowercase g, not uppercase M, uppercase g, nor is it lowercase m, lowercase g. If we look at cobalt, it must be uppercase C, lowercase o, not both uppercase. That would be a completely different chemical. If we look at chlorine, it's capital C, lowercase m, not both capitals, and so on. If you write the letters in the two-letter symbol in both uppercase or in both lowercase, you will be marked wrong at all cases. If there's just one letter, it will be a capital letter. So let's look at a couple of examples. If you are doing a typed answer, this won't make a big difference to you, but if you're handwriting them, you want to be particularly careful about these problems. So here, let's look at aluminum. The abbreviation is AL, so we'll put an AL. What do you think? Is this correct? Well, notice that this A, while it is large, is not a capital A. Capital A needs to be this triangular one. And then notice that the L has a little hook at the end of it. That might be considered a capital, so we want to be careful to make sure it's just a line for the letter L. Another one that I see a lot of is this one, BR for bromine. We see the capital B, and then we see a smaller letter R. So how do I know if that's correct? Well, we know that's not correct. Even though it's a lower or smaller R, it is still written as a capital R, so that one would be marked wrong. Size isn't so important there. What about this one that we had as example before, CO versus CO? The uppercase C, lowercase o, is going to be the symbol for cobalt. That's a nice blue rock, very beautiful rock. On the other hand, this one here with the uppercase C, uppercase O, is carbon monoxide, a deadly toxic gas. So this is just to show you that capitalization matters. We are talking about different chemicals depending on how you capitalize them. When you're writing the names of each of the elements, they should all be in lowercase letters. Well, these are names. They're not names of people, so we're not going to have them capitalized. Of course, if these are the beginning of a sentence or the only word you have, the first one might be capitalized. It's preferable that you don't capitalize any of them so that you're consistent about using names without capitals. Now let's go over the list of 30 elements that you need to memorize. Since this is a list of chemicals for you to memorize, I strongly recommend that you use flashcards for this set. Most of what you learn in chemistry will not require you to do flashcards, but there are a few things that it'll be important for. So for this one, you're going to want one side to be the word, the element name, and the other side the symbol. And make sure that as you're testing yourself, you look for capitalization and be very careful about the spelling. These flashcards are particularly nice to do for yourself because you learn a lot by writing them yourself. Also, then you can take them with you when you go to the grocery store and you're standing in line waiting. You could flash out a couple of them. You can use these to study while you're waiting for your kids in line at school or while you're watching a soccer game or something like that. Usually what we do is we take out the ones that we know right away, start pulling those out, and then just leave in the ones that we don't know so much, and then go back and start adding them back in. Make sure that you can do all of them very quickly and easily. Let's start kind of in a different way. We're going to look at, there are about 8 of them that have one letter symbol, 8 from our list. We have carbon, fluorine, hydrogen, iodine, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur. Notice that they have only one letter, and that letter is a capital letter. So these ones are a little bit unusual in their symbol. What else can we look at? When we look at fluorine, this is one of the most difficult ones because people like to put a second letter there. And this one also has a spelling issue. So if you look at how fluorine is spelled, it's Fluorine. It's the UO that seems to be a problem. So make sure that when you're running this, that you spell it with an FLUO, not OU. The OU would be fluorine, and we certainly don't have that. So this is called fluorine, and that is one of the hardest ones to spell. You can almost guarantee that'll be on one of your quizzes or exams. Another one that's a little bit of a challenge to spell is phosphorus. Not particularly hard, but it's kind of a longish word, so PHOS, PHOR, and then US. If you're from another country, you may have seen another spelling for it, but notice that this is in the US, so we're going to end up with just US. And then we have right underneath that potassium, and notice that something unusual about that is that the potassium starts with a P, but it has the letter K. You're going to see that throughout all of this list, that there are some of them that don't make sense. Why are they using the letter K for potassium? Well, this old name for potassium was kalium, and so they used the letter K for that, but in the American version we call it potassium. So the Latin name was kalium, and so it stuck with the letter K. Now let's look at some of the ones that are a little bit easier. So these ones most people will be able to get right away because they make sense to them. First one is aluminum, and the abbreviation is AL. Again, capital A, lowercase l. The only trouble with this one sometimes is its spelling, so make sure you have aluminum, not aluminum. So make sure you're careful with that one. The next one is barium. Most people have no trouble with barium. Barium, and abbreviation BA. And next we have bromine, which is Bromine, and that has the abbreviation BR. The next one is calcium. Again, this is the easy one, so Ca for calcium. And the next easy one is cobalt, Co for cobalt. And back up at the top here we have lithium, which is Li. And next we have Ni for nickel. That one makes sense, but sometimes people confuse nickel and nitrogen, so be aware. Ni is nickel, and also be careful with the spelling. Notice that it ends with an EL, not an LE, so be very careful with that one. And the last of the easy ones is going to be silicon, which is Si. And again, be a little careful with the spelling. It is silicon, not silicone. Silicone is a different chemical. And now let's look at the ones where the second letter is not the same as what we would expect. So we have cesium, and it has the letter CS. Skip to the E, but that one kind of makes sense. Cesium. Then we have chlorine, which is CHLORINE, but the abbreviation is just CL. So be very careful with this one, that when you're spelling it, you don't put the L second. Don't forget that H. That's going to be one of the ones that people have trouble with spelling. Next we have magnesium, and again it's going to be Mg. Then we have rubidium down here with Rb. And next we have strontium, which is kind of a long name, but the abbreviation is SR, not ST. So make sure you have strontium with SR. And finally at the end we have zinc with Zn. So those are our easy ones, and now we're going to look at some of the more challenging ones. The reason these are challenging is, again, because they're using their Latin name, and so the abbreviation doesn't seem to make sense. So I'll go through them and I'll give you some clues of ways that I remember it. These have no official way of doing it, but it just helps sometimes to hear a different way of thinking of them. So the first one we have is antimony, and that's SB. So antimony, the way that I remember this one, is that son of a bleep didn't pay his alimony. So I remember that kind of isn't quite right, but it does remember the two letters. SB goes with antimony. And the next one is copper, and if my boyfriend gave me a ring that was made out of copper, I would say CU, so the letters are CU for copper. If he gave me a golden ring, on the other hand, I would say AU, like you, so that's AU for gold. Then we have iron, and that's FE. Might say Fe, I don't want an iron ring. Lead is PB. Now lead, coming from PB, that comes from the fact that it used to be plumbers that used lead pipes. In the olden days, we used to have a lot of lead pipes, and plumbers would work with them, and so they were called plumbers because they were using what was called plumbus, and that was lead. Our next one is Mercury. The way I remember this is Mercury is a god, so he's a god, Hg, Mercury, Hg. And again, he was one of the Roman gods. The next one we have is silver, and silver is Ag, Ag, it comes from argent, Ag for silver. The two that are commonly mixed up are gold and silver, so make sure that gold, remember, is Au. Au, I like that gold ring. Ag is Ag, don't really care for that one, so Ag for silver. And next we have sodium, which is Na, it stands for natrium. And this one is one you would say nah if you got a ring made out of that, because it would burn, and in fact it often catches on fire in water. And our last one to do that is a little bit unusual is tin. And the way I remember tin, the abbreviation is SN. I just remember tin is a sin. And again, these are just some memory tools that helped me to remember those. So that's the whole list of 30 elements that you will need to know the names and the symbols for the first one of the first lab quizzes that you take, and definitely on the first exam.